I did my project on how inventions throughout history have impacted the way we live on a day-to-day basis today. A few of the inventions I chose throughout the 1600s was first in 1608 made by Hans Lippershey. He invented the first refracting telescope. Now, this impacted us today because before he invented this, no one really knew what was in space, what planets looked like without what stars looked like. And after the invention of the refracting telescope, all of this was possible. The second invention I chose was in 1620, and that was the human-powered submarine invented by Cornelis Drebbel. And this was a model for further submarines invented throughout history. It was later improved by David Bushwell in 1776 nearing the Revolutionary War. And submarines really impacted World War I with submarine warfare. And they're important to us today because they are used to find out new depths of the ocean. The third invention that I chose was the calculating machine, which was made in 1671. And this impacted us today because calculators are used in most math classrooms. And this was kind of a model to a handheld calculator that we use today. The last invention for the 1600s that I chose was made by Englishman Thomas Savery, and he invented the steam pump. This impacted the Industrial Revolution, and it was used to pump water from deep depressions in the ground. It was also later improved by Thomas Newcomen in 1712. A few of the inventions I chose for the 1700s were first in 1701 when Jethro Tull invented the seed drill. This changed and improved agriculture because this required less labor, which meant less slaves during the Industrial Revolution. And of course, this idea was changed multiple times into inventions that we have today that help farmers cultivate their farms. The second invention was in 1764, and it was the spinning jenny. Again, this helped the Industrial Revolution by making the process of spinning threads way faster than it was before with the human labor. The third invention was in 1786 when John Fitch invented the steamboat. This, of course, helped speed up the travel between people during wartime, and it also helped with quicker exploration and the exchange of goods. The last invention of the 1700s was in 1794, made by Eli Whitney, and he made the cotton gin. Though this was supposedly supposed to decrease the amount of labor and slaves, it actually did the opposite by increasing the labor of the slaves because the planters believed that because of this machine that took out the seeds of the cotton, that they would use the slaves to grab more cotton so they would profit from the money. The 1800s was a huge jump from the 16 and 1700s in the number of inventions that were invented. The first invention I chose was in 1804 by an English engineer, and he developed the first steam-powered locomotive. It didn't work as well, but of course, this was changed over the years throughout history. Some of the impacts that this had on society was it increased child labor because they needed to make sure that the rails that the locomotive was traveling on was safe to drive on, and also it increased pollution because it was steam powered. All of the steam would rise to the top and um, go into the air. The second invention was in 1809, and that's when Humphrey Davy invented the first arc lamp. And this was used mainly in mines. And then later on, Edison came over, and he was the inventor of the first electric light bulb. But both of these men impacted us today because it would be hard to imagine today's society without electric light. The third invention was in 1814, and this man right here was the first person to take a photograph. Took the camera 8 hours to take one single picture, and this impacted us because without photography, we wouldn't have any images except of our visual images that we would make from what we learned about wartime and just history in general. So in 1829, American William Austin Burt, he invented the typewriter, and this impacted wartime because without computers, printers, and cell phones, um, letters would be written by the typewriter or ink. It was later improved by Christopher Scholes in 1867. The next invention was made in 1850 by Joel Houghton, and he granted the first dishwasher patent. So this was the first dishwasher, but it did not work well. So in 1866, Josephine Cochrane improved it. But though it was made in 1850, dishwashers were not introduced in homes till the mid 1900s. One of the most important inventions was in 1876 when Alexander Graham Bell he invented the telephone. And this was important because, of course, this was the first model of a telephone that would be later improved multiple times to the cell phone that we use today. And the last invention of the 1800s was by Tesla, and that was the AC motor in 1888. And this impacted us today because when it gets hot and humid, we always turn on the AC in our homes. A few of the inventions in the 1900s that I chose were first in 1901, Marconi received a radio signal over the Atlantic. This was huge because before this, it was impossible to send any radio signals without wires, let alone over the ocean. So in 1898, he sent a 18-mile long radio signal. This invention was probably one of the most important in history. In 1903, the Wright brothers invented the first airplane. And this has impacted us because other than a boat or ship, there's no other way to go across oceans in a quick time without an airplane. So in 1918, the radio circuit was invented by Edwin Howard Armstrong, and this is important because every single TV set and radio in the world today has this radio circuit inserted inside of it. And then in 1923, Garrett A. Morgan invented the traffic signal, And this is important because without traffic signals today, roads would not be safe to drive on. Then in 1940, Peter Goldmark invented the first modern color television system. This has impacted us today because all TV today is in color. And though this was invented in 1940, this was not put in every household until way later in the 1900s. And then in 1947, mobile phones were invented by Martin Cooper, this guy right here. And he also invented cell phones later on, but those were not the modern day cell phones that we use today. And though these mobile phones were made in 1947, they were not sold commercially till the 1980s. So also during this time, Apple was becoming more and more popular. So this is one of the first computers by Apple, and it's called the Apple Lisa. And then in 1984, 1 year later, the Apple Macintosh was invented. And then in 1985, the Windows program was invented by Microsoft. So though there were many inventions, and there are many inventions still being invented during the 2000s, I only placed one here, and that was the GPS. It was invented in the late 1900s, but it was only used by military, and in 2005 it started showing up in stores. The reason I only put one invention was because many of the new inventions coming out are newer, improved versions of older original inventions. And the GPS was made by Ivan Getting, Roger Easton, and Bradford Parkinson. So these inventions show how history has changed over time. Many of the inventions during the 16, 17, and 1800s were for the purpose of wartime and need of communication. They were also needed to make society a better place to live in and to improve it for future generations. Now, during the now they're mainly made for people's wants over their needs, and it's no longer hard to get these inventions on hand versus like how it was before when they came out. Only the rich people would be able to get the newest phones or anything that came out. This really shows how they've shaped society today, because it's not that hard as it used to be to buy a new phone, new TV, or new creation by an inventor.